Stand by just for one moment. I want to go back to Scott MacFarlane, who's joining us live from outside of that courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia. Scott.
Yeah, James Comey has just pleaded not guilty here in federal court in Alexandria. They are going to put this case immediately on a slow track. Comey and the prosecutors here are going to waive speedy trial rights. There are a number of complications here, including the fact that classified information might be involved. So we have a not guilty plea as expected, but everything now goes into a slower lane. And I expect we're going to measure this case in a matter of months, not in days or weeks, even though, as Caroline said, we are in the rocket docket, the fastest moving federal court in America, the Eastern District of Virginia. Noting this, Comey's attorney is uniquely high profile. Pat Fitzgerald, who has had a number of high profile defendants, including in this courthouse, is also the former U.S. attorney in Chicago. This is a high octane defense team going against Lindsay Halligan, the U.S. attorney who, oh, by the way, is in her first ever role as a prosecutor.
All right, Scott, before I go back to Caroline, I just want to ask you a question, having covered Capitol Hill and now justice in Washington. These charges of lying to Congress, and they have to do with questions that the former FBI Director James Comey was asked while he was testifying before Congress about authorizing leaks to the press. Now, we know, that there were leaks to the press, but the question, of course, is, did he authorize it? He said he had not. But even if for the 5 years up until the statute of limitations ended, he had not been indicted, it's still kind of a pretty serious charge. And it could, there is a possibility where someone might say, yes, the director of the FBI authorized me to talk to the press. Is that not out of the realm of possibility?
We know there's a nexus, Vlad, of this case into testimony he gave in 2020. We know that in part because the charging document, though thin, alludes to a statement Comey made to Congress. And we know it happened 5 years ago because they ran right up against a deadline of 5-year statute of limitations to file these charges. As I speak to you, I'm looking through the notes of our reporter in the courtroom, who thankfully has uniquely good handwriting. And we can get more of a readout of what actually happened in court today. James Comey did speak when the charges were read. He said back to the judge, when asked if he understands what's happening here, Comey said, "I do, Your Honor. Thank you very much." And that his defense counsel did, in fact, review the indictment, which is a small document so far, just a page and a half. Very limited detail in the charging document. Looks like we didn't get any more detail of what the U.S. Department of Justice is alleging here. The not guilty plea has been entered. James Comey, just as expected, as he said in his social media video a few days ago, has requested a jury trial. The charges have been formally read, and on brand for this courthouse, Vlad, as Caroline alluded to, they move fast. This thing started early. They began the arraignment 5 minutes before it was scheduled.
All right, Scott MacFarlane for us with the breaking news. If you're just joining us, former FBI Director James Comey has just pleaded not guilty to charges of lying to Congress. We are obviously going to continue to monitor what is happening there in Alexandria, Virginia, including if the former FBI director decides to step to the camera and make a statement, or even if he posts one later on his social media feed, which he is known to do. Let's go back to CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi. So, Caroline, you just heard Comey has pleaded not guilty. But my question to Scott, that you could sort of add color to, is this charge of lying to Congress, which has to do with whether or not James Comey authorized leaks to the press. Even if it is thin, even if the charging documents don't have a lot of weight to them, he could potentially, there could be something that comes out that finds him guilty. But the question is, of course, if they hadn't found anything up until now, do we expect that to happen?
Yeah, I think that Scott just broke some big news there, which is that there is going to be classified information involved in this prosecution, which will slow things down quite a bit when you deal with those types of issues. It can take some time because, again, it's highly classified information. So you need protective orders and things of that nature. Now, regarding the strength of the evidence, there has been, and as Scott noted, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was just placed in an interim position as an acting United States attorney, Lindsay Halligan. This was her first ever criminal indictment. And the way in which she was appointed, is quite extraordinary. Eric Seibert was pushed out of that position. And I would think that the defense would be making dispositive motions based on that and the statute of limitations. As we know, it's an easy case, but it's sort of convoluted in that it charges conduct based on 2020 testimony that then refers back to 2017 testimony. And you're right, it is in regards to the potential of these leaks of validation and signing off on these leaks, but we'll see what the government has. I think that's a lot of new news. If they do
All right,
have,
Caroline, stand by just one moment. This is a very fluid, obviously breaking news situation. So let's go back to Scott MacFarlane, who's joining us from outside of the courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia. Scott, what do you got?
Oh, you're going to love this. We have a system where different people are running out updates as this proceeding goes along. We have more information now. The prosecution was arguing that this is a complicated case that requires more time. And the judge here, Michael Nachmanoff, a Biden appointee from a few years ago, expressed some skepticism that this 2-count indictment, which is just a page and a half, is a sufficiently complicated case right now to warrant such a slowdown in the proceedings. So we already have our first bit of skepticism from the judge in a case that has drawn a bit of skepticism from nonpartisan legal analysts who've said this is untraditional how this has played out so far. The initial trial date has been set, or at least it's been talked about as January 12th. I would not write that in permanent ink. Federal trial dates tend to be very slippery at best. And in this case, you see the possibility, if not the likelihood, of motions to dismiss, potentially a superseding indictment, more information to be released. I would think that a trial date that ambitious is just that, an ambitious thing to put on the calendar for now.
Wow, that is some very, very interesting color there from Scott MacFarlane. Let's bring in Caroline Polisi just to add her thoughts on what Scott just broke for us here at CBS News 24/7. Caroline, what do you think about what the prosecution was asking for and the judge's response?
Not surprising. Nachmanoff is a pragmatist. And again, it is standard practice in this jurisdiction to move quickly. I do think there will be a lot of snags. I wouldn't count on that January date staying firm, particularly in this discovery process. There's a lot.
Go ahead, Caroline.
There's a lot that is publicly known about this case, and the reason that the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, who was previously in that position, declined to prosecute that case is that it's been run up and down the flagpole quite a few times. He reviewed the evidence in the case and decided not to prosecute, and that's why he was, among other things, that's why he was pushed out. There was also, remember, a special counsel investigation into John Durham that reviewed the evidence in this case and decided not to move forward. There wouldn't be enough evidence to obtain a conviction if there was a prosecution. And specifically, that has to do with different witnesses' testimony. But there's a very fulsome review of what actually transpired here. So, the additional curveball of the classified information could slow things down a bit. But already we're seeing this pushback from the judge. I think that's a pretty strong indication that he won't really tolerate many antics from the prosecution in this case.